Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my July 2023 TBR. This is going to be a fun TBR because I have a ton of genres represented. I have Star Wars, Star Trek, middle grade horror, I've got science fiction, I've got fantasy, I've got young adult dystopian, and I've got one book that I think is fantasy, but it might be horror because I bought it in the horror section. And that book might be the most surprising book on my list. So I have 11 books this month, and even though it's the summertime when I have more time to read, I'm only doing 11 this month, and that's only for a couple of reasons. For one, I am working on, in July, I'll be working on prep work for my classroom for the school year, and I want to have some time for that, and that requires a lot of reading and that part of my brain, and so I'll be devoting some time to that. We also have the last week of July is band camp, and I won't get much reading done then because I'll be helping out with our school's band camp. And then also, I have a few holdovers. I had a bunch of tomes, big books. I consider books over 500 pages tomes, and I had I want to say like 5 or 6 tomes in June, and I'll get to all of them. I'll be finishing them up the first few days of July, and so that'll take up some of the time that could have been for other books. So I have 11 books on this list, one of which is a new release. So I'm going to talk about my new release first, and my new release book on my TBR is Delilah Dawson's Inquisitor: Rise of the Red Blade from Star Wars, from the Random House Worlds Publishing. This is a kind of standalone novel about the Inquisitor Iskat, I believe is her name. This is actually a rare book that I haven't looked up too much about the book, about the plot or anything, because I'm excited to kind of go in blind. I know that the characters in this book showed up in one of the comics, in the Darth Vader comics briefly, but I'm still really excited for it. Delilah Dawson has become one of my favorite canon writers because she writes plots so well. The plots in Phasma were fantastic. The plot in the Black Spire novel, fantastic. And her non-Star Wars books have really kept my attention because I've really enjoyed what I've read of hers. And the only reason I'm not reading more of her other books at the moment is because I can't find them because my local bookstores don't have any more of her books. So because of that, I'm really excited. This was and has been my #1 most anticipated book of the year. So I'm really excited to get to that, and hopefully it's as good as I've been hyping it up. On my news videos, I've talked about different versions of the book you can get. There's the one from Inkstone Press, Inkstone Books, which has the red sprayed edges. There's the one from San Diego Comic-Con coming out. If you're there, you can only actually get it if you're present, but all that stuff's coming out, and I'm really excited for that book. So the next book I have is my only other Star Wars book, and that is The Young Jedi Knight's Trouble on Cloud City. If you've been following the channel, I've been reading through these like one a month for quite a while now, all this year, 2023 in fact, and I love this series. Kevin J. Anderson, Rebecca Mesta get Star Wars and get how to write it for younger audiences, although the story matures a little in this series. They did a set of 6, a set of 5, then a set of 3, and this is book 13 of 14, so this is in the middle of that last set of 3. And I technically read part of this a while ago, like when I was like 12 or 13, so like a decade ago. I remember like one thing about it. So I'm very excited to read this, and I'm almost done. I only have one more Young Jedi Knight book after this. So I'll get to that this month, and that'll be a quick read. Speaking of quick reads, I have Douglas Adams's The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Yes, book 2 in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Douglas Adams, I read the first book, and while I found the plot frustrating, I thought the writing was hilarious, and I liked the writing style quite a bit, despite the fact that, again, the plot was not good. So I'm expecting the plot not to be good here, but this is just for fun. This is just for funs. So that'll be a quick read. Speaking of quick reads, I have Star Trek. The first Star Trek book on my list is Star Trek Klingon, the novelization of the hit CD-ROM. There was a time when they were making these click and move with your mouse games for CD-ROM for Star Trek back in the 90s and the early 2000s, they didn't have the budget to do high-tech Star Trek video games like we do for Star Wars or other properties, and so they had to do CD-ROM type stuff. And this is a novel by Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush, who I believe are married. And then it's based off the script by Hilary Bader and with a story by Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush. So from what I gather, they actually had input. And this book isn't even 200 pages. This will be the shortest book I read this year. It's not even 200 pages because it has, I think, like about 60 or 70 pages of bonus material behind the scenes, how the game was made, how the book was made. Star Trek Publishing at the time, it's got all that bonus material at the end, which should be a lot of fun to read. So I'm excited to get into that. My only other Star Trek book on the list for this month is an old Star Trek book. This is the novel My Enemy, My Ally by Diane Duane. Many people cite this as one of the classic, not just because it's old, but because it's really good, apparently. One of the classic Star Trek novels. And I know like one of the YouTubers I follow, Robert Meyer Burnett, talks about this book a lot. Some of the book communities I've been in have talked about it. I want to check the year that it came out. 84. It came out in 84, so it's a classic book. And I don't know if Diane Duane wrote episodes of the TV show, but I know that her novels were very important. So this is a pretty quick book. You know, it's only about 300 pages, so it should be a fun read. Speaking of quick, fun reads, we have Dead Voices by Catherine Arden. This is the second book in her Small Spaces quartet. I don't know if my book reviews come out yet as I'm recording this, but I did read book 1 in the month of June, and I loved it. I had a blast with it, and this is going to be this is book 2, and I have book 3. I'm still looking for book 4. But I thought it was just a delightful, scary book for kids, and it might be a little bit too much for certain age kids, but it's still a delightful book. So I am excited to read this book. The first book really was weird and creepy and fun to read. Then I have The Faded Sky. This is a sequel to one of my favorite books that I read this year, The Calculating Stars, which that review is up, I believe, and I loved The Calculating Stars. Top science fiction for me. I thought it was a brilliant novel, and it has the For All Mankind feeling to it. Like, if you love For All Mankind, you gotta read The Calculating Stars. It's got the alternate history, it's got the space race, it's got women involved in the space race, it's got all the same type of ideas, but it's a fun science fiction series, and this is the follow-up to book 1. It's a decent length, it's just under 400 pages, but I'm really excited to read it. I read book 1 in like 2 days because I was just so excited to read it. So that's that one. Next, I have another sequel, Fragments by Dan Wells. This is the sequel to Partials by Dan Wells. I read Partials this month, not knowing what to expect going in. Dan Wells is quickly becoming a favorite novelist of all time for me. I love his books. And this, the first book I read, I loved it. The review's coming soon. And it shocked me. There's so much shocking about this book. And I actually can't talk about why I'm excited to read book 2 because it would totally spoil book 1. So I'm going to not spoil it. I'm not gonna do it. I'm just saying it's YA dystopian and you need to read it with a lot of science in the series. Next, I have a fantasy novel, Night Watch by Tim Akers. This is the first in his series. I like the pun, Night Watch, because it's not like night. Anyway, but this is a fantasy series. A pretty nice cover, actually. I like that cover. And I picked this up for a couple of reasons. One, I've been getting into Baen books because I think Baen's a great publisher, and I'm trying to read shorter fantasy novels. And I also heard Tim Akers speak on a YouTube video, and I thought he was very interesting. So I picked this up, and I am excited to read it. Then I have another fantasy, although a very, very different type of fantasy, by Jane Linscold called Library of the Sapphire Wind. I actually interviewed Jane Linscold as part of the What Price Victory interview that I did with David Weber and a bunch of other authors. And this is her series she's in the middle of. Book 3 comes out this year. Books 1 and 2 are out in trade paperback and in mass market. And this is a pretty short book, but it's got, kind of anthropomorphic animals, and it's really, it looks like it's just going to be a fun series. I've already looked at the naming convention in the book. I'm really worried about the naming convention, that I'm going to get confused, but it is a cool design of a cover, and I'm very interested in reading more of Jane Linscold's work. All right, the final book on my list, the one that I think is going to surprise people that it's even there. People in my friend group in the Awkward Silence gang already know this, but I think this will surprise people, and that's The Gunslinger by Stephen King, which I have to say, I actually kind of like the design of this book with the cover, and when you think about the sequels in the book, in the series, it actually matches them up pretty nice. But this is the first Dark Tower novel. I've never read anything Stephen King before. Stephen King is an author I've avoided because I've heard he has so much language and horrific stuff in his books, and I'm just like, why would I want to read that? But I was like, I'm getting into horror, I'm getting into new authors, I want to prove that I'm willing to give authors a chance. So to do that, I heard this is like kind of a fantasy, but also kind of a horror, and I heard it's more like a cerebral book. And so I thought, it's really short. It's only about 280 pages, not even that, 250 pages. So it's a short read, so it should be a quick little in and out read. And, if I love it, there's more books in the series, and there's more books by Stephen King. And if I don't like it, it's not too much of a commitment. So those are the 11 books on my list for July. Not quite as big as other months, but in terms of number of books, it's actually quite standard for me. But in terms of page count, this is actually a bit low, and that's just because I have a lot of prep work going on in July, and I want to make sure I get that prep work done, and also because I have some holdovers from June, because I was ambitious in June. In June, I got a lot of it done. I still have a few more days left in June, and I'm almost done, but I was ambitious. So that is my TBR. If you've read any of these books, let me know which ones you read, which ones you liked, which ones you disliked, and which ones you're most excited for me to read, and which ones you think are not worth reading. Let me know all those thoughts, and also, what are you going to be reading in the month of July? Let me know all that as well, and please make sure to subscribe to the channel so you see all these book reviews, because I will be doing a book review of every single book here. So until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.